Hello, good evening, and welcome to our final live stream of our events week. So my name is Simeon, and we will be your hosts today. And I'm a third year environmental science student.
I'm Rowan. I'm a third year history and international relations student. It's really great to have you with us this evening. As Simeon said, this is our last live stream for a 3-week set of events. The whole thing has been under the title of Imagine, and this week specifically, we've been focusing on the idea of truth. And yesterday, we put up on our Instagram at Imagine Reading University a short talk about what if the Bible was true. I really recommend checking it out. It's really accessible and it's on the Instagram as an Instagram TV or on our YouTube channel under Roku.
Yes, but tonight we are blessed to have Claire talking to us on the topic of imagine if the impossible could happen. But before that, we have Vanessa here to give us a little bit about her testimony. So hello, Vanessa.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Vanessa. I'm a third year law student. Yeah, not there anymore.
That's right. Well, over to you.
Okay, so I'm about to tell you guys about my testimony, and I've been thinking about this all day, and I realized I have so many testimonies when it comes to God, but I will make it really quick. So I grew up in Nigeria/Wales. So from the age of 0 to 10, I lived in Nigeria, and everyone had like a religion. You were Christian, Muslim, or traditional worshiper. So to me, like God was just always a thing. It was just whether you were a Christian, Muslim, or a traditional worshiper. And I grew up in a Christian family. Then we moved over to Wales, and then I was surprised that people just didn't believe in God. That God wasn't a thing. Like people were just living their lives as like believed in science or other stuff. And then I went on this whole curiosity thing of like, is God really real? Is God really a person? Is like, why do I just believe in God? Like, and then I'm from the age to 10 to 13 kind of thing, I was just on this kind of discovery thing of whether God is real or not. And then I went to camp and I saw God so potently. Like to me, it was just like I believe in God. Like though I couldn't tell you that I couldn't tell you like what made me all of a sudden, and then I just looked to like throughout my whole life, and I just seen God, how amazing God had been in the small things, in the big things, in the things that I struggled with. Like for instance, when I think the time that I struggled the most in my life was probably when I'd never been really good at school. Like I'd never been the smartest person. I always struggled with school, and like I never knew. I remember telling my family that I was like, I think I might be dyslexic, and I remember all of them like laughing like, oh, Vanessa, always self-diagnosing yourself, because I do that. But but then my English teacher said it, and then we found out I was dyslexic and dyspraxic. And to me, it was like for a whole period, for the longest time in my life, I people just thought I was careless, or people just thought Vanessa was just very rowdy, or people thought I didn't really concentrate and stuff. But then, like, I don't know. I felt like there was something wrong. Like I was stupid, and I mean, no one should ever think that about themselves. But I was really hard on myself because of that. Like, I think that's the thing that I struggled the most with. And God just being there with me, that was a massive thing. But God has also been there with the smallest of thing. Maybe I forget my charger and I'm in the library and I'm freaking out and I have to go back and walk back home. And it's just like I'm frustrated with myself that day. But God is still there. Like with the tiniest things and with the biggest things I've suffered with, God has always been there for me, just kind of like being my biggest cheerleader. Like I don't need anything to have like to take me through life. When I look at my relationship with God, it's almost like I just need God to be there with me. And I think that's the thing that's kind of helped me through like throughout my whole existence, that like even when I struggle with public speaking out loud, has always been God. So I think that's my testimony. It was very short testimony, but that's it. So I'm gonna hand over to Simeon and Rowan to
Yeah, thank you, Vanessa. It's so great to hear how God shows up and walks with people in real life, first-hand account. I always love hearing it. If you out there felt encouraged or felt moved and have questions about what we mean when we say that God is with us, or any questions about tonight's talk, please do connect with us at the Christian Union, ask a Christian friend who might have brought you along, or get in contact with any of our social media pages, and we'll be happy to get back to you.
Yes, so now it's time to introduce our speaker, Claire. Hello, Claire.
Hello.
Yeah, so obviously you're Claire, but what do you do? Where are you from?
So I'm currently in Guildford, which is like the poshest place I've ever lived. And I work with Christian unions in the surrounding area. So I have 3 that I'm kind of attached to. 2 are arts universities, and they're based in Epsom and a little town called Farnham. And then I also work with the University of Surrey Christian Union. And it's basically just helping students like you guys think about like the big questions of life and faith.
Yes, Claire, that sounds fantastic. I know that you have a connection to Reading. Would you be able to just tell us about that?
I do have a strong connection to Reading. So I also studied at the University of Reading. I feel like a dinosaur because I graduated in 2017. Which in like student terms, that's like so long ago. Like a pandemic has happened since then. But yeah, I studied at Reading. I did ancient history. The Edith Morley building was my best friend alongside the library. And if any of you are at Reading and you have yet to try a snake bite, you have not lived. Now, snake bite is this beverage that they make at Park Bar. Actually, I think all of the bars. And it's like a little bit of Ribena, a little bit of beer, and a little bit of cider. And it is like this bright purple colour. I think it's gross. I personally think it's disgusting, but it's like the mark of a Reading student. So if you see someone walking around Reading and you see like they're wearing a white t-shirt and there's snake bites about, risky. You don't want to be found in a white t-shirt in the vicinity where there are snake bites. But go and try one. Once you're back at uni, it's worth it.
Yeah, no, I personally do love a good snake bite, and that's one of the things that I do miss about Reading campus is going to Park Bar and having a snake bite, especially in the summer. It's a good time for that. Yeah, thank you very much, Claire.
You're so very welcome.
So before we start our talk, there should hopefully be at the bottom of the screen a banner. Oh, look at that, which will tell you how to interact with the talk. So if you have any questions, go onto our Slido, enter the code, and then you should be able to post as many questions as you like. Remember to vote up the ones that you think are interesting, and and Claire will be answering them for us at the end of the talk.
Yeah, Claire.
Over to you, Claire.
Great, thank you so much, guys. I wonder what obstacles or tasks you have come up against that were seemingly impossible. I remember my first couple of weeks at uni. I think I was on the grassy bit outside of the library. And I bumped into some final year students, and I just couldn't imagine how they'd gotten to their final year. I could barely imagine getting through the first term and on to Christmas. Or I remember sitting in my first dissertation lecture in second year and thinking, how will I write 10,000 words about the Romans? And then that dreaded deadline came and I made it. Signed, sealed, delivered. I finished my dissertation, thank goodness. Before last year, it was impossible to imagine that I would forget what day I had showered, and I spend most of the day in my pajamas anyway. Yet here we are. You'll be pleased to know that I've dressed up and done grease for you tonight. To be quite frank, the end of lockdown feels really impossible right now. But we do know eventually that that day will come. Come on, Boris. We imagine the impossible because we imagine hope. Humans cannot face the future without hope. In these last 3 weeks, the Christian Union has been imagining what a better world could look like. A world where everyone is treated equally, with dignity and respect. A world where our pain isn't pointless. A world where no one feels lonely. We have been exploring these topics because we believe the person of Jesus Christ answers some of those wonderings. He holds that hope that we so desperately need. And tonight we delve into the impossible. Imagine a world where death is defeated. Imagine escaping death. Whoa, hold up, Claire. We just got really deep really fast. And yeah, it did. But it's true, right? There are many obstacles we face in this world, from dissertations to just getting through uni to wearing jeans when we've been wearing pajamas for 6 months. The one obstacle that faces us all is death. Probably for a lot of us this past year, that fact has really stared us in the face. I remember scrolling, doom scrolling it's called, I've recently found out, in April, and realising that I was reading death tolls. Like, how nuts is it that I live in a world where there are daily death tolls? But then it shouldn't surprise me. There's not a lot we can guarantee for certain, but one thing that I do know is that one day I will die. Okay, chill, we don't need to be all doom and gloom about it. Whether you've joined us for all 3 weeks or whether this is the first time you are viewing Imagine, welcome. You are really welcome here. What we see of Jesus tonight is what the whole Christian faith hangs on. Without the death and resurrection of Jesus, what we chat is absolute babble. Well, let's look at what happens. Here is one of the accounts of Jesus's death and life. It is found in the Gospel of Mark. You can Google the Bible if you'd like to read along with me, but I'm going to read from Mark 15, verse 37. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." Some women were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the younger, and of Joseph, and Salome. In Galilee, these women had followed him and cared for his needs. Many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem were also there. Jesus, this guy who had been performing miracles, teaching in amazing new ways, treating the lowest of society with the greatest dignity and respect, dead. His own people and the Romans crucified him, the most embarrassing, mocking, and cruel deaths one could experience at that time. But we know that this is not the end. 3 days later, we read this in Mark's Gospel, chapter 16. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll away the stone from the entrance of the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe, sitting on the right-hand side, and they were alarmed. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." Jesus is alive. The guy in white robe is Jesus. From agonizing crucifixion, buried for 3 days, he rises again. Yeah, that sounds pretty nutty to me too. Now, there are a lot of theories surrounding how and why Jesus could resurrect. I mean, it's not an everyday occurrence. We have time afterwards in the Q&A to get into the nitty-gritty of the arguments if you so wish. But for now, let me just say this. You would have heard in the passage that there was mention of women being present at Jesus' death. Only Jesus' female followers saw him die, and then they were the first to see him risen. In the last 40 years or so, people have really started to take women's oppression and therefore their rights much more seriously than they did before. And this small fact adds weight to showing the truth of Jesus' resurrection. You see, in both Roman and Jewish court, a woman's testimony wasn't taken as truth. It just wouldn't be true. So why would somebody write about Jesus rising and attest that fact to the word of a woman? You simply wouldn't do it. If you are daring to say that Jesus rose from the dead, you wouldn't risk the legitimacy of your document unless it really was true. The only possible explanation for this impossible event is that it happened. I don't want to spend too much time in the logistics of a dead man rising. As I said, we can talk about it in the Q&A. As I mentioned before, the whole Christian faith hangs on this very event. That's because it has implications for us today. And I just want to explore two of those ways that might mean we can imagine the impossible. Jesus' death and subsequent resurrection means that we are no longer apart. We are not alone. Imagine a life without separation. Being apart is just now the norm, right? There is just less social interaction, or if there is any at all, it's on a screen like right now. And so even more acutely than before, we have felt this apartness. We have felt this separation. And it's rubbish. A sickness, a virus is driving us apart from each other. It weakens us. It makes communication way more difficult, and it can make us feel lonely. That's what it's like between us and God before Jesus died and rose again. Remember in the passage how it jumps to a picture of the temple? I'll just read this little sentence again. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The temple, which was in Jerusalem, was the place where the Jews worshipped God. They believed that was the place that he dwelled. And it had like many different rooms and layers. There were the outer courts where people would gather to worship. There were the inner courts for like the priests. And then there was the inner sanctum, the most sacred and holy of places. And this is where the Jews believed God resided. There was this big fat old curtain that was surrounding it. And it ripped right down the middle, just as Jesus died. What this means was that God was no longer separate. There didn't need to be all these rituals and rules to get to God. You see, in order to have a good relationship with somebody, ultimately we need to see them face to face. The best relationships are the ones when we are together. But stuff, curtains gets in the way. A lie, a broken promise, gossip, selfishness can drive a wedge between us. We need forgiveness. We need to say sorry. We need forgiveness in order for that to reconcile that relationship. We can't just sweep stuff under the carpet. Eventually, something has to happen. Justice has to be served. Jesus is that justice. By him dying and taking on all that crap that we do and others do to us, all those metaphorical curtains that get in the way between us and God is dealt with. Jesus says, I'll deal with it because I love you and because I no longer want you to be separated from me. Jesus is the all-access pass, behind the scenes pass to God. For us right now and the virus, that's probably the vaccine and hopefully the eradication of COVID-19 that will bring us back together. For us and God, Jesus was that vaccine. He is the eradication of the virus. Jesus stepped into humanity. Jesus came so that we would no longer have to be separated from God. As a huge extrovert, I have deeply felt that need to be with people. I hunger for it, in fact. It's hard, but I know in my deepest and my darkest and most lonely moments that I'm never separated from God. Number 2, imagine securing your deepest hopes. Jesus resurrected so that we can have hope for tomorrow. Hope is a word that feels like wishful thinking. I hope I'll make it through lockdown. I hope I pass that exam. I hope there will be some kind of summer holiday. I hope I get a job. In this season, I must admit that there are days when I've struggled to feel hopeful. Although overall, you might be able to tell I'm a pretty positive type person, but the pessimist in me has lost a lot of hope. Hope in the government, hope in my landlord who still hasn't fixed our broken heating. Hope that things will improve. Yeah, what is hope? It's like that tiny flicker of light, that small quiet voice that says, Dare to believe it will be better. My guy Obama had a lot to say about hope. He says this in his book, which is named The Audacity of Hope, which he released just before he became the President of the United States. Hope. Hope in the face of difficulty, hope in the face of uncertainty, the audacity of hope. In the end, that is God's greatest gift to us, a belief in things not seen, a belief in better days ahead. The greatest gift from God, hope. Interesting. Daring to hope sometimes feels too much, and yet isn't hope a pretty big driving factor in our lives? In this locked down and locked in life, there must be something willing us to believe in better days yet to come. You see, Jesus' death and resurrection didn't mean that he just defeated death for himself, but for all people. Let me back up a bit here. I was reflecting over this last year and the things that I did to try and cope with the pandemic. One big way was escaping. We couldn't escape physically, so I turned to books and TV. Has anyone gone back to old TV favourites? I certainly have. Disney Plus is like my favourite thing that's come out of lockdown. Anyway, for me, Harry Potter is the greatest escape. I hope you've read it, but if not, there will be some spoilers. Reading Harry Potter this past summer, I was transported once again to the wonderful and weird world of Hogwarts, mythical creatures, potions. Snape actually turned out to be good. Utter bliss. But why do we gravitate to the comfort of fairy stories? Why do we immerse ourselves in the stories that are not real? Well, the writer of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings trilogy, J.R.R. Tolkien, wrote precisely about this in an essay. He said that fairy tales and make-believe encapsulate us because of 4 key factors. Number 1, they can step out in time and space. Number 2, they can escape death. Number 3, they show a love that never ends. And number 4, they show that good can finally triumph over evil. Voldemort is defeated once and for all. Excellent. The end. We love it. What Tolkien goes on to say is that although these stories are make-believe, they show us something that we might want to believe. They show us what life possibly could be like, or what life possibly was intended to be. That there is something inside of us that can imagine a better world. In the end, that is God's greatest gift to us, a belief in things not seen, a belief in better days ahead. Jesus' death and resurrection has shown us tonight that death is totally defeated. Why does Jesus bring hope? His resurrection means that death is not the end of us. It means that we will be resurrected one day. Eventually, the rubbish, the hurt, the inequality, the crap that gets in the way will cease. Do you dare to believe the impossible? Do you dare to hope? You may be sitting at home. You came because your pal from the Christian Union has been telling you about these talks and you thought, to please them, you'll give it a go. But really, you're not all that keen on this Jesus life and death chat stuff. That's okay. The Christian faith allows you to poke your head inside, think and decide if it's for you. You can come back to it. If something has intrigued you, please get in touch. There are ways to get in contact with the Christian Union. Either message your pal or send the CU a message directly. But maybe these big questions of life have been aching in you for a while. You've had an inkling that you can imagine that there is something better than we already have. Maybe you're thinking, yeah, I don't want to be separate from God anymore. Or yes, I want that audacious hope. If you're in that place to consider Jesus for yourselves, here are 3 things for you tonight. Firstly, faith isn't about absolute certainty. There is room for doubt. When you come with your doubts, that is belief. Number 2, consider praying. Praying is just a way of talking to God. It doesn't have to be grandiose. It is, in fact, very simple. Something like, Father, forgive me for what has separated me from you and please accept me. I'll give you the opportunity to pray that with me in a moment. And number 3, don't do it alone. As we all know, being in community gives you strength. So text your friend right now that brought you along and say, I want to pray that prayer. Or message a member of the CEU now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pray. And if you feel like you want to say yes to Jesus, make the next steps towards faith, pray with me. If not, just sit and chill and send me your best TikTok. I'm going to pray. Father God, I pray that if there is anything helpful I have said tonight that is of you and that is truth and that is striking, God, I pray God, that you would work. And God, I pray that if there is anything I've said that is unhelpful, God, I pray that it will be forgotten. Father God, I pray for those tonight that feel like they want to take the next steps of faith. God, I pray for them and for us. God, please forgive us. Please forgive us for the things that have separated us from you. God, I need your forgiveness. But God, I also recognize your son, Jesus. I recognize what he did for me. And I recognize that I want to have a life with him. God, please, will you be present with those people now? You are good and holy. Thank you, God. Amen. Thank you for imagining the impossible with us. I'm going to invite Sim and Rowan back now.
Thank you so much, Claire. Absolutely fantastic talk. And I think we can all relate to the fact that we could all do with a bit of hope. So we will have a Q&A with you in a second. So if you're watching and you haven't put any questions in, do head over to sli.do.com and type in your questions. The details should be in the description to the video. And on the banner at the bottom of the screen. Do go over right now, type in your questions. Even if you don't have a question, go over and upvote some of the questions that are there, and we will hopefully ask them in a minute. But for now, I'm just going to talk about our social space that we are having after this. So tonight we have our event Task Faster, which, believe it or not, may relate or look similar to another program that may have aired on Dave that we just didn't want to say the name of just in case of copyright. So I'm sure that'll be absolutely hilarious. Go along with your mates. There'll be some ridiculous tasks and a great way to unwind. If you haven't got the Zoom link or you haven't come along with somebody from the CU, do message the CU page and then we can get that Zoom link out to you as well. For now, we'll have some questions for you, Claire.
Yeah, great. One note on that Task Faster, I've never seen more chaos when we did it before. So I really would recommend it. Anyhow, our first question from the Q&A is, how do you know Christianity is more than just somebody's imagination?
Really good question, whoever sent that in. I guess I have 2 examples for that. One is like a historical nerdy, I studied ancient history example, and you'll appreciate this, Rowan, because you study history too. And second is like kind of more modern day example. So depending on if you saw the video yesterday that Ollie gave about the reliability of the Bible. It could be easy to be like, oh, why do you believe this? Like, this is just a figment of your imagination. The thing is that the Bible kind of gives the hard facts to back that up. And not only does it give the account of Jesus in one way, but in several ways. So there are the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And they are 4 accounts of Jesus's life. And they're amazing, not because they're great stories of Jesus, but from a historical standpoint, they are some of the best evidence that we have of someone leading life at that time in ancient history. I remember studying authors that wrote in a very similar time frame when I was at university studying Greek and Roman history, and we'd have like 1 copy of that piece of evidence, and that was taken as like absolute truth. And so in the like ancient history and the classics world, these 4 documents have a lot to say about the reliability of who Jesus is and was. Then kind of moving on to like a more modern day example, it might surprise you to know that there are about 2 billion Christians in the world. That's quite a lot of people. It's not the whole world, but that's quite a lot of people, and it's been exponentially growing since that time. And so if you know many Christians, I would just say to you, like, maybe ask them about their story, a bit like Vanessa told us tonight. Sometimes it's quite good to gather for yourself, like, what lots of different people have to say about Christianity. And so don't just take my story or Vanessa's story or Rowan or Sim's story. Ask lots of different people what Jesus and what Christianity means to them. And I think you'll find that the facts probably add up.
Oh, thank you, Claire. That's really interesting. I love that. Right, our second question is, how can we know and believe Jesus came back from the dead when there's no evidence?
Oh, a cracking question. Thank you.
I'm really roasting you this evening.
It's all right. I need a good roasting. Well, I'd like to maybe push back on that and say there is evidence. I just described the 4 Gospels, so there's 4 accounts of Jesus dying and rising from the dead. As I mentioned in my talk, I talked about women being there at his death and resurrection, and about women in that time period not having, like, literally they could say something in a court of law and it wouldn't be taken as truth. And so kind of the idea with that is that, like, why would Jesus choose to reveal himself to women? Why would the gospel writers choose to write down the testimony of women unless they really believed it's true? So that's one theory. Another theory that I'd like to offer you is that kind of the transformation that happens to people after Jesus died and rose again. So a great example is someone called Paul. He's found in Acts in the Bible. And not everybody is like this, but he had quite a considerable transformation when he realized who Jesus was and what Jesus had done for him for the first time. You can read about it, start at Acts 1, ask one of your friends to read it with you. But essentially what Paul goes on to do is amazing. So he starts off as this guy that's like, I hate these Christian people, they are really annoying. And he, in fact, persecutes them, to someone who ends up writing a lot of the New Testament. And so just, you can see how people's lives have been transformed. And that only happens through the resurrection of Jesus.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, the next one is, how can we believe everything is possible in Christ when there is so much failure and pain?
Like, an amazing question. And I've never noticed such pain for so many people in this past year. And so thank you so much for that question. And if that's something you really feel, like, I feel for you. Yeah, really difficult. I guess what I want to say to you is that what happens at the cross is final. There's lots of, like, arguments and things we could say, but I would say someone being willing to sacrifice themselves, die for us, and then rise again is a pretty big thing. That isn't taken very lightly. And what goes on to happen in the rest of the New Testament is that Jesus actually promises to come back. But he can only promise to come back if he's proved that he has been dead and buried and has already risen a first time. And so what I want to say to you is that in the world that we live in at the moment, we do see pain and we do see suffering. But it says later on in the Bible that every tear will be wiped away. There will be no more mourning and there will be no more crying. And so as Christians, that is the hope that we hold on to. And we see glimmers of that now, but we know that is to come.
Yeah, great. Oh, thank you so much. And our last question this evening is, how can I know that when I talk to God, someone is listening?
Oh, yeah, really, really good question. Thank you so much for that question, by the way. I guess like God speaks to us in lots of different ways. One primary way that he speaks to us is through the Bible. And sometimes you might find you'll be reading the Bible and like bits will really come alive and they will like really jump out at you and you're like, oh my days, that's me. Like that describes exactly how I feel right now. But that's also what faith is. I guess I said kind of towards the end of my talk that having faith isn't like absolutely blind, but it also, and so you can get to know God slowly and gently. You can read about him. You can be surrounded by Christians that know him and love him. You can experience church online right now. I guess for me, it's just like trusting and knowing. Like I feel like things happen for a reason, and a lot of those things I can attest to God. I would just say try praying, try talking to God, try asking him something, and see if it happens.
Great, yeah. Oh, so many amazing questions, and what a treat to have Claire Dent back with us. We'll just invite Simeon back now for some finishing notices.
Yes, as Rowan said, thank you so much for answering those questions, Claire. That was some fantastic answers. But equally, that was only 4 of the questions that you guys may have. And actually, those answers to those questions may have prompted even more questions. So if you came along here tonight and you've either got questions, maybe you prayed the prayer that Claire said at the end of her talk, wherever you're at, if you have any kind of interest, or anything going forwards that you'd like to ask or find out, do feel free to go down into our comments section. There is a feedback form. First of all, we'd love to hear how you found the live stream, and if you come along to the event, we'd love to hear how you find that as well. But also in there is a link to a coffee morning on Saturday at 10 a.m. You can come along with either somebody from the CU that you know, or if you don't know anybody, there will be people there that you can get to know. Really, really lovely, bubbly people who will just smother you with love. So do feel free to come along to that. Yeah, and so this is the official end of our live stream. We'd love for you to come along to our social at 7:30. But from us here now, thank you very much, and bye for now.
Thanks.